Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
In this episode, we talk with Kate, James, and Lacey about how we deal with and cope with regret in sobriety. We talk about ways we've changed our focus from the past to the future to allow ourselves to heal. Learning to put the past behind us in a healthy way allows us to truly value and look forward to the future. We owe it to ourselves and to our loved ones to give ourselves the freedom to move forward.
If you like what you hear on this episode, hit subscribe or follow, rate the podcast. And I want to challenge you to share the episode with a friend. Sobriety podcasts are hard to get out there, and you never know who it can touch. So let's dig into this episode.
We are here today with Kate, James, and Lacey. I'm going to ask you guys all to introduce yourselves real quick. I think we'll start with Lacey. I've actually followed Lacey's story for quite some time. We quit drinking pretty close to the same time. I just hit 14 months today, and I think you're just like a week behind me. Is that right?
Congratulations. Yeah, I am just about a week behind you. I'm at 418 right now. So I'm getting there. I surpassed the year mark finally.
Awesome. Cool. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself?
My name's Lacey. I'm at 418 days sober. I live in Pennsylvania, work a full-time job, have a house with my fiance and my pet cat, Storm.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here, Lacey.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll go with Kate next. And we met Kate on Instagram. She is Walking the Straight Line on Insta. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I am from England. I've lived in New York and Rome and all over the place. I'm a writer, and I do writing for things. I write comics for Disney, and I write about working in war zones for the UN. So massive spectrum. I've been a drinker since I was about 14 or 15, and I was drinking up until recently about 10 bottles of wine a week at home when I was doing absolutely nothing other than watching Game of Thrones. I mean, it just became a habit. It became what I did. And I'm in my 40s, and I just thought, I can't go on like this. I've been arrested, I've been hit by cars, I've fallen through glass doors, all that stuff, and nothing ever stopped me. And eventually I just thought, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. And I am 327 days sober today. And yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. No going back.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Really grateful that you are here. And then James, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm from the UK. I'm 2 years on Monday from cocaine, not alcohol. Yeah, it was years and years and years of an issue, and then getting a handle on it, and then it coming back, and for about 20 years, give or take. You know, among other substances and stuff. And 2020 was a definite wake-up call, and I had 6 months sober, then did the inevitable falling over, and then it's on Monday it's 2 years.
That's awesome.
So,
Awesome.
good.
Cool. Congratulations.
Congratulations, James.
So to introduce our topic for today, something I see come up over and over in the recovery community is people struggling with feelings of regret. I think we do a lot of things while we're drinking or drugging that we regret terribly later, and it can be really hard to reconcile those feelings. So when have you experienced regret, and how have you learned how to cope with those feelings?
Do you want me to speak?
Sure.
Have at it.
Go for it.
I've got probably a different view on this to most people, because I hated myself every morning when I woke up. I I was disappointed in myself. I didn't love myself. I was not proud of myself. I didn't like myself. I felt shame, regret, embarrassment. Now, I did that the same as James for 20, 25 years. And I did things that I regret. Obviously, everyone does things that they regret. But I never really hurt anyone. I never got in fights. I wasn't that type of drinker. I hurt myself. So when I stopped drinking, I almost made the decision when I woke up and I realized that there was this new way of living where I didn't wake up hating myself and I started to love myself for the first time in my adult life. I decided to not have regrets about anything I've done. And I genuinely parked it and said, do you know what? The things that I've done have made me who I am. They brought me here. I haven't ever left anyone, I've hurt myself and I forgive myself for that. And I don't only blame myself, I blame society and their big alcohol and myself. But I just thought the things that I've done, every left turn or right turn you make, I can never go back there. So all I can do is say I've experienced things that other people haven't, and I'm still alive and I'm changing, and that is what I'm going to focus on. And I genuinely do not feel guilty about the things that I've done. And I know that's not easy for everyone, and I know that's not possible for everyone, but for me, I've managed to do that. And I am just excited about the future, and I will talk about the things I've done openly and say, of course it was embarrassing, but I don't feel regret about them because I am who I am, and I'm proud of myself for the first time in my life, and I'm not going to give that away. So that's kind of how I see that.
I'm kind of similar. I am in the best place I have ever been in my entire life. Life is good. There's so much hope for the future. I like who I am. None of that could have been said before. And so while there are things that I've done that I do regret, it's easy to not dwell on them because all of those things had to happen in order for me to be where I am now. So I think really similar thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly where I'm at with it too. I did a lot of stupid things, ingested quite a few different substances over the years, but it all had to happen. I mean, I was hardest on myself because it was me doing all of these terrible things. Like there was one instance where I actually did hurt someone once. It was actually my fiance, and him and I are still together, but in a fit of rage, drunk fit of rage, him and I ended up getting into, a little argument, and I bit him. My teeth sank into his arm, and it's so embarrassing to think about now. And then, there was the time that I broke down crying on my back porch whenever my dad tried to drop me off. Like, it's just, I spent a lot of moments embarrassing myself, maybe even humiliating myself, ruining my one friend's college graduation party because I ended up downing an entire bottle of vodka and then throwing up all over the inside of my car. My car somehow ended up in their parents' backyard, and I don't really know how that happened. And just various things like that. I mean, yeah, they happened. I mean, all I can really do is just show everyone now that I'm not that person. I'm more responsible. I'm not going to act like that. And between me and my fiance, it involved an awful lot of communication, about why it happened. I'm quitting drinking because things like this aren't going to happen anymore. And it just took a lot of willingness to communicate on both of our parts to reconcile all of that.
Takes a lot of time, doesn't it?
It did. It took a lot of time. Even now, situations will happen and he'll expect me to freak out. He'll expect me to lose my cool, start yelling. And I remind him all the time, like, I'm not that person now, but I understand why you think I'm going to act like that, but I'm not. I'm a lot more clear-headed, level-headed now than I was whenever I was, say, fifth deep or however.
Yeah, when you have a partner in there, when, like, I know if you at mine, there's all the lies and the deceit and the hiding and all of that stuff. Like there wasn't a lot of truth told in that relationship for a very long time. And for that to, even to reconcile that. But I mean, listening to you guys, it sounds like the regrets used as motivation.
Listening to you lot now, I'm thinking when I say I never hurt anyone, well, I obviously did hurt. I did have fights with my partners, and I did, ruin people's evenings and stuff like that. I meant like I physically didn't drive a car into a school bus or something, like that. But I did hurt people individually in small ways. But, so what you're saying, Lacey, I was certainly no innocent person who just went around getting drunk and blacking out. I was a nightmare. But I didn't leave anyone without limbs or anything like that, which is, for me, how I justified in my head for so long I could carry on drinking, I think, because I thought, well, I'm only hurting myself. Everyone else has gone to work today. They might be upset or whatever, but sometimes those emotional things are harder to come to terms with. I know I just pretended they weren't happening for so many years, and I'm lucky that people still talk to me, quite frankly, but they do, and I am lucky for that. But yeah, I'm the same. I wasn't blameless at all.
I am grateful that none of my friends just kind of cast me aside, like, hey, screw you, we're not going to talk to you anymore. Like,
yeah,
I was pretty lucky there, and like I never caused any like real true physical damage to anybody either. Didn't have any crazy accidents or anything like that. It was mainly just all emotional damage.
I think people can tell that alcohol is playing a part, and they know that's not us because they see us when we're not high or drunk, and they know that we're kind people. And that, I think that's why they hung around, personally. I hope that's why they hung around. That's certainly what they told me. And that makes me happy, because it meant people didn't think I was this sort of crazy person. But
I'm in a very similar place myself, as in I've come to terms with a lot of the things that I did, and we discussed the lies and but that was a very long process, and definitely led to my first relapse, because I just couldn't get over the feelings of guilt, and it's the shame, isn't it? The shame and regret are such interlinked emotions, and I think, to anyone listening, like that's, it will be the fuel to a certain degree in early recovery, the shame of when you actually come out of I felt like I was in a fog for 20 years, with times of sobriety in between and stuff. You come out the fog and you start seeing what you've done and the person you became to a certain degree. And that is danger, period, for quite for different times for different people. But it definitely fueled my first relapse. And I can't really say I haven't hurt people without I obviously don't want to incriminate myself, but I was involved in supplying stupid stuff like that, like 10, 12 years ago. And I lost track of who I was, and we became quite successful in that area. And yeah, it's an industry dominated by violence and misery and fear, and in my justification was always looking after people, and looking, that was kind of, I had to keep them safe without the realization that I was creating a lot of that unsafety. So, and it's when that definitely led to years of more of addiction, because when I realized what I'd become, we got out, we stopped, but I could never really face up to that. And because that was never me. I'm not that, but the addiction and the need to feed the addiction had led me down a very dark path. And it's a lot of the forgiveness that I found is within the community, you know, and the ability to overcome that regret, because some of the people that I've met were, you know, the people I was perpetuating in the past by the things I was doing. And that took a long time to come to terms with. But it's very important. The point of it is in the past. You've got to get up every day and do better. And I personally feel like I've got quite a bit to make up for. So, you know, I try to be better on a daily basis and not let that person out the cage again, because I don't like him very much. And, you know, and it's you lose who you are, you lose your identity. And it's just early recovery. Regret is going to feel you, and you have got to get a handle on that. You've got, the past is another country, and there is a certain selfishness to being locked in regret, because the people around you who are supporting you and have put up with your shit and are there for you now, like, you're not helping them if you're beating the shit out of yourself, are you? You're not, you know, getting better if you're living in regret, and it's only going to lead you one place. So you have to park that. It's like acceptance, isn't it?
Yeah, that was kind of my first thought about this, was using regret for motivation, right? It was the motivation. It was like every time I'd have another piece of that past that I regretted, it came with a whole slew of things. It came, you know, it came with like healing. It came with tears. It came with the acceptance of, okay, this is what I've done. And now what am I going to do about it? Like, I have to do something about it now. Like, why am I regretting this? I'm regretting this because I've failed myself. I failed my daughter. I failed my wife. I failed, you know, there's a whole bunch of that kind of gets all wrapped in there. And James, like you said, you're just a shell of yourself, right? You let your boundaries go. You let your, you know, you don't stand up for yourself at all. Your moral compass is absolutely shot. Your version of right and wrong is the version of selfishness that you see today, so you can feed the addiction. Like, that is whenever I can get my next drink is the selfishness that I'm going to use so I can go and get it. Regardless of who around me is in the way, I'm still going to try and manipulate. I'm still going to try and lie. I'm still going to try and deceive, because this is the first thing on my mind, is to get another drink, because I'm already 6 deep and that's not enough for today. So I think a lot of it for me is that regret's been very much a driving force into figuring out the things that I do regret and being able to accept and move on from them. You know, you guys talk about hurting people, and there's the physical pain. I mean, I was my daughter was at daycare, and I picked her up and I dropped her over my shoulder. Like, what did I do there? I mean, I was drunk when I picked her up. First thing I did was grabbed her, and I moved as far away from all the other teachers as possible and tried to get out of there as soon as I could. And I made up an excuse as to why she came over my shoulder. And then I went and bought her French fries to try and make her feel better so she would stop crying. And I took a sideways way home, so if somebody called the cops, I wouldn't get caught. And then when I got back home, what did I do? I drank. Like, that took me a long time. I can still hear that kid scream. I can still hear the scream in my head. Like, I regret it. Yeah. Do I accept that that's what happened? Now what am I going to do about it? I have to make sure that I don't ever meet that man again. It's kind of like what James said. I don't ever meet that man, the man that ran from instead of stood in front of. That's hard stuff.
Well, it's a bit like it's like walking away from someone but not forgetting them. You remember what's happened because you don't want to go back there, but you can't stay holding that person's hand and feeling the regrets of that person anymore. Because what James said, which I've never heard anyone say before, about it's selfish to hold on to those, and I think that's so true. That really has just hit a nerve with me, and I agree completely. We've taken enough time from people, haven't we? We've used enough, we've tested their patience, pushed them away and expected them to come back. Now is the time for us to sort of put our big girl pants on and go, right, it's time for me to do some stuff that's good. And I think that's why a lot of people in the sober community get this kind of, I love myself and I want to help people, because it's so unique for us to be a nice person and not hate ourselves, that we suddenly realize how incredible it is. That other person is gone, that person, the shame, regret, the annoying, embarrassing person. And we think we want to help other people realize it's possible. But you do have to park that person and say, I will never be you again, but you are in the past.
I think it's interesting when you get into the communities, like the sober communities, like we're all a part of. When you share your regret and you share your shame, you help someone else with theirs. Like that is probably, when you talk about helping someone, that's the first thing that came to my mind, is you end up sharing those stories and those, the crazy things that you did, Kate, when you went through the glass door or whatever that may be. You never know about those stories, Lacey, ending up in a backyard.
No, and I tell people that because people feel so much shame. And I'm like, look, I went to a knitting group and ended up in a police cell locked up. I went to a knitting group in a town hall because I was dragged along and I ended up locked up. I mean, honestly, it's funny if it wasn't so awful, because I had 2 little children at home and my husband didn't know where I'd gone. He thought I'd popped out and would come back with half a scarf. And I came back at 6, 7 in the morning. But it's by telling other people and saying, look, this happened to me, but it wasn't really me, that, then they feel so much more, they feel less shame. Like you said, it's like, well, actually, if she can talk about that and that's worse than anything I've ever done, maybe I shouldn't beat myself up so much. And I agree, it makes you feel like you're not alone. And that goes so far in the healing process.
Yeah, I think I struggled a lot with regretting all of the time that I wasted. I was definitely a problem drinker for at least a decade. Probably the last 6 years of my drinking, I was pretty well checked out. And that's when my kids were, they were little and I was there physically. And I pretty much missed a good chunk of their childhoods. And I just look at all of the time that I wasted. And that's maybe one of the hardest things for me to reconcile, is just that huge, like that whole decade of my life that I essentially threw away to addiction to alcohol. And it's still something that hits me. And then I just feel really bad for a while. I think sometimes I manage to talk my way through that. Sometimes I can acknowledge that 10 years had to happen just the way it did for me to have the kind of future that I have now. I appreciate my life so much more.
But Julie, I do have a question, because I used to think that, and I said that, and this woman said to me, Kate, I'm 70 years old. I'm getting sober for my grandchildren. And when I hear you talk about missing out on the first 10 years of because I'm nearly a year and I've got an 11 and a 13-year-old. And she said, I know it feels bad for you, but I drank throughout their whole lives. My children are now 40 and I'm doing this for my grandchildren. So when you say it's bad, imagine how it is for me. And you know what, since she said that, because it made me feel awful, and she said, don't feel bad. I wish I'd done it before, but that's my point. She said, I could carry on again, but I'm not, I'm stopping. And it doesn't matter. You can't keep worrying. And have you had that experience as well? Because it made a real impact on me when someone said that.
I don't think anybody's ever put it quite like that, but it's a good point. I think I'm so grateful for my life now, and I appreciate what my life is more now than I ever could have if I had not lost that decade. If I had just gone about my life floating through it, letting life happen, I don't think that I would appreciate every day the way that I do now. And so maybe that 10 years had to be what it was for me to appreciate everything that I have now the way that I do. I think a lot of us in recovery see our lives in a different light. We really grab onto life and we live it like we mean it. And I think without an experience like ours, some of us wouldn't do that. Some of us would still just be sitting back, letting life happen the way it does. And now we live it with intention. And I think for me, I needed that to happen in order to live a life with intention. So I can kind of hold on to that feeling. And I like what you said, Kate. That's actually a really good point. I haven't met a lot of people who are that much older who have that to share. But yeah, I think it all goes back to we can either choose to look back at the past or we can look forward toward the future. I think that's kind of our only option if we're going to keep going.
Mhm.
Yeah, like my story is similar to Julie's. It's kind of like that lost decade, but it's the lost decade that I needed to show me that I can appreciate today, because I never did before.
Yeah, that's a really important thing about recovery as well, isn't it? You learn to exist in the now, and once you get over or you put the regret in its box where it belongs, right, and you stop treating happiness as a destination. Like which a lot of addiction, or it is about, isn't it? It's like, I'll be all right if I have a drink or I have a whatever, that'll solve it. That'll solve how I'm feeling inside. And lots of people do it with holidays, shopping or, whatever it may be, the destination they think is happiness or fulfillment. And I think the thing that we were doing was going to kill us. And that's the hard, cold reality of it. So I think in a way we're lucky because we have to deal with it. We haven't just got a bit of debt, or we haven't just unhealthy relationships. Not that there's, what's better or worse, but we have to wise up and we have to start living in the now and start existing in yesterday and what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's kind of the gift from recovery, isn't it? You learn a very, very fucking hard lesson. I pay a heavy fucking price for it. It's a price I pay.
Yeah.
Someone give me time over, I'd probably do the same. I don't try to avoid some of the things, because well,
and I know, like Julie and I have had the conversation, whereas I don't know that I would be here without having gone through all of that. So I feel like instead of regretting it, I have to feel grateful for it. I'm here. I'm alive. I can do my best to rectify all of those things in my past, and I can do my best to try and be here for today. So I mean, I don't feel like I'm losing. It is a gift.
And it's not just here and alive. Most of us are actually thriving in a way we never would have been if it weren't for all of the wasted time and all of the poor decisions. And
I think that's I've just been asked to write a chapter for a book, and it's sort of 15 or 16 people recovering, and they're each writing a chapter. And it wasn't till I wrote down the words that I feel like I haven't moved on since I was 15. I've been mentally I've just stopped, and I've got to learn about myself, because actually alcohol just stopped everything. And it was constantly recovering, drinking, recovering. And I'm like, I haven't grown in so many ways since I was 15 years old. And I think it's that appreciation and excitement for life that you have when you're younger that we're all experiencing. And that's why we're these ridiculously happy middle-aged people, and younger, obviously. Lacey, I'm not including you. James, maybe. But, do you know what I mean? We're acting like teenagers, and we've been given a life, and we're like, we can do something, we can make something, we can do something today, and we can remember it tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. And it's that incredible charisma that I think I see in people that is just amazing. And it is that realization that you haven't really been moving on as you should have for all those years. And I find that quite interesting, because that just sort of came to me when I was writing it. I thought, yeah, it's true.
It's the ability to sit with emotions, isn't it? Like, the one thing you learn in early recovery, you've got to sit with that shit and feel it, because there ain't no hiding it no more. There ain't no, I feel great tonight, but tomorrow I'm gonna, but it's all right, I'll have some, tomorrow or whatever, and that'll take it away. And it's that, learning to sit with you, and that is it's a pretty damn healthy way to live. And when you're in recovery, because you still have to be careful. 2 years down the line, I still have to be very careful. I have to acknowledge that monkey's always going to be there. And, learning to sit with your emotions and learning to be, doesn't give him any food, doesn't give him any power.
I just think it's amazing to finally love myself. Like, everything that's in the past is in the past. You can't change it, but you do have to come to terms with it, whatever way that you choose to do, and move forward, build a future for yourself. Remember the past so you can prevent it from happening again in the future. But you got to forgive yourself for it and keep going. No matter what you did, you still have a life to live, and it can't be spent thinking about the past.
I was reading through a couple of my old posts today, and I came across one about acceptance, and that's almost the opposite, the polar opposite to regret, isn't it? It's that acceptance, and even when it's really, really difficult, but it's not, again, it's not something you get to and then you go on after that day and you've accepted it. It doesn't work that way. It's a choice you've got to make every single day. Even when you get up and, I'm a lot happier than I used to be, but of course we all have bad days, and you've got to actively make the choice to accept your past, accept your reality, accept where you are, the mess you may have made, or the things the good things as well. And that's got to be an ongoing choice, an ongoing journey, because again, it's another, you can get cocky, and that's where it can lead to a couple of years down the line, problems, because you think you've got there, and you have in a lot of ways, but you've always got to keep doing those practices and going through that journey and accepting those things, and not letting the regret monkey out of its bloody box. So,
the regret monkey.
Sat on your back, isn't it? Just whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
Lacey said something really important that I don't know how much we've touched on, and that is forgiving ourselves. And, most of the people in my life that I did hurt in some way or made a fool of myself in front of, they have forgiven me. We have to give ourselves that same forgiveness. We have to show ourselves the same grace that all of these wonderful people in our lives are willing to show us. I think it takes a lot of work, but I think we owe that to ourselves. We owe that same level of forgiveness to ourselves.
I agree. What would you tell a friend if a friend were to approach you and say, hey, I was at this party last night and I tripped, I fell, I embarrassed myself, and it was a birthday party for my friend and it was ruined, and it's, and it's all because of me. It's all my fault. What would you tell your friend, if they approached you with that situation and they wanted to try and rectify it and they couldn't forgive themselves and they were beating themselves up over it? You have to show yourself the same compassion that you would show to a friend who was in that situation.
Yeah.
We always say that. I'm very good at giving advice, but I beat myself up so much more than I would never make someone feel bad. I would always say, are you okay? I would always say, do you need some help? Or that this is what happened. Why did it happen? Work it through, you're right. But but I never do that to myself. I make it 10 times worse. I work through all the different feelings. That what are they thinking? What are they speaking about? Then this will happen. And you're right. It's important to always say, what advice would I give a friend in this situation? And it's never the way that I treat myself. We all are our own worst enemies, I think.
We really are. We're so harsh on ourselves, but for no good reason. I mean, we think we have a good reason, but in reality, no, we're just beating ourselves up whenever the people around us, they've probably already forgiven us and we don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say there's a counterpoint to that, though. It can't be permissive to being kind to yourself, because sometimes being kind to yourself in the old days was having a drink or having a whatever, and you can't kind of give yourself a blank check. You do have to, sometimes you do need to have a stern word with yourself, but it's not when it's calling yourself a dickhead, that wasn't the best move, It wasn't my best work, I think the core of it is honesty, isn't it? And being honest with yourself as well, as, because sometimes you would say to a friend, well, that was dumb. Sometimes you do have, but it's a balance between the two things, as with everything. It's the balance of not being permissive, not allowing yourself to get away, because we still have behaviours and patterns that will possibly come out in other ways, and we do have to recognise them, like cross addiction, and like I was in NA for a bit, and I got quite involved in like the organisation bit of it and that, and I went to this monthly meeting, and a few of the people there were high. And they weren't high on drugs. They were high on what they were doing. And that was a real clear example of crossing, and okay, that thing they were doing was good. And they were helping people and they were throwing themselves into it. But it was still the same thing. It was still the same reality. They were still running away to a certain degree from maybe what they'd done, regret. It's the monkey. It's always going to be there.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say thank you, Kate. Thank you, James. Thank you, Lacey. Really appreciate you guys coming on. Kate and James from across the pond. Really nice having you guys on the podcast and taking the time. Lacey, on a Saturday afternoon. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your thoughts and sharing your stories.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
We'd also like to thank our listeners for sharing this space with us. Remember to subscribe or follow to keep getting new content. And if you have any comments or topic suggestions, you can email us at throughtheglassrecovery@gmail.com. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore life on the other side of alcohol.